Welcome to Born to Win. I'm Brian Proctor, and each Monday I share a message designed to help you start your week with focus, clarity, and intention. These episodes are built around timeless principles that, when understood and applied, can change the direction of your life. If this podcast has been meaningful to you, please rate it, follow it, and share it with someone who could benefit from these ideas. It helps this message reach people who are ready to hear it. Every episode is designed to remind you that success is not something you chase, it's something you allow. You were born to win, and when you live in harmony with the laws of life, you begin to experience that truth in every area. So take a deep breath, open your mind, and let's get started. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever noticed how two people can earn the same amount of money, and yet one feels prosperous and the other lives in lack? Always talking about how much everything costs and fixated on the lack of money. The one who feels prosperous moves through life with confidence and generosity, and the other lives with anxiety and fear that what they have could disappear at any moment. Same economy and opportunities, but completely different experiences. Why is that? Today I want to talk about your relationship with money, and more specifically, your prosperity consciousness, because money itself is rarely the real issue. We are all living with money paradigms that were formed long before we ever earned our first paycheck. The question is, are those paradigms about money telling a story of lack or abundance? The ideas we absorbed came from our environment, the way our caregivers handled and talked about money, conversations we overheard at the dinner table, and the emotional experience we had while growing up. And those ideas, when repeated often enough, felt like facts. But repetition does not make something true. It only makes it familiar. And the mind loves what's familiar, even when what is familiar is limiting. That is why change requires effort. You're not only moving towards something new, you are overriding the pull of what feels safe and known. So today, I want to ask you to step back and question those patterns. Because the moment you begin to examine a belief and look at it from a wider perspective, you start to loosen its grip. You gain personal agency to take back control from ideas that may have been directing your thinking without you even realizing it. And this shift in consciousness is when your results begin to change too. So here's the thing. Money is rarely just money. For many people, it becomes tied to identity and security, to self-worth, and sometimes even to love, status, or power. I'm not going to talk today about earning money or saving money. Those are important skills, but they are not where real change begins. Real change begins with your relationship to money. More specifically, with your prosperity consciousness. Living according to what feels familiar rather than what is actually possible is very common. When you move through your days without questioning your results or asking why things are not changing, you are simply existing, repeating patterns instead of creating progress. Maybe you grew up hearing phrases like, money doesn't grow on trees, or there's never enough. We're not those kind of people. Statements like these get repeated so often that they feel like truth, but they're not. They are ideas that have been accepted, repeated, and passed along. But money itself is neutral. It is neither good nor bad. Money is a vehicle, and like any vehicle, it follows the direction of the driver. Now, don't misunderstand me. When money is not there, you feel it. You feel pressure and uncertainty, and sometimes you feel fear. That experience, it's real. But fear, when it becomes the dominant influence, does something predictable. It constricts, and that constriction stops flow. I was taught that money is energy, and energy must circulate. Think about blood in the body. Circulation is what keeps every organ nourished and functioning. When circulation slows or stops, the body becomes unhealthy. The same principle applies to money. When money circulates intelligently, value is created. Businesses grow, people are employed, opportunities and prosperity expand. Money moving through an economy, through relationships, and through acts of value creation is what creates progress. But fear causes people to hold tightly, and that grip almost always comes from fear of never having enough. Now, I'm not suggesting reckless spending. Circulation does not mean carelessness. It means understanding that money is a tool. It is a medium of exchange for value. When you provide value, money flows toward you. When value stops, flow slows. This is not mystical, it is cause and effect. Let me share something personal here, because the idea of circulation was not just theory in my house growing up. I watched my father live it. People sometimes assume that because my dad became successful, money must have always been easy for him. That's not true. When he first began studying these principles, he was deeply in debt. He had no formal education, no special connections, and no safety net. What he did have was a deep desire to change the direction his life was going in. I remember him telling me that one of the biggest shifts he made was learning not to fear the lack of money. He learned to respect money, to direct it wisely, but not to cling to it. He invested in books when he could barely afford groceries. He traveled to seminars when it would have been easier to stay at home. He was not reckless, he was intentional. He understood that money invested in growth, in understanding, and in value creation circulates back in ways that most people cannot see right away. That left a very early impression on me. I saw firsthand that prosperity is not built by tightening your grip. It is built by expanding your thinking beyond what is in your bank account and looking at the bigger picture. It is about how you think and the gratitude you have for your life. I've met people with modest incomes who live with a deep sense of abundance. They are generous and optimistic. They expect good things to happen, and over time, their results begin to reflect that inner state. I have also met people with tremendous wealth who live in constant fear of losing everything. No matter how much they accumulate, they still feel poor. You know, my father used to say that some of the saddest people in the world are those who have only money, because fear causes them to hold so tightly that they miss the things that make life rich. Connection, joy, loving experiences with other people. These things create meaning and gratitude. Prosperity is a mindset of personal worthiness to achieve wealth, success, and fulfillment. It begins by seeing yourself as capable, seeing opportunities where others see obstacles, and trusting in your ability to create value. This is not about waiting for something to happen. It's about taking charge of your life. For things to change, things need to change. You cannot change yesterday, and you cannot change the time you got out of bed this morning. But you can change your attitude and your thinking today. This is really about becoming more of who you are, not just the small portion you have been showing to the world, but the fuller version of yourself, the part that holds your real ability and potential. When my father taught about money, and specifically income, he liked to use something he learned from one of his mentors, Earl Nightingale. Earl called this the formula. It is part of the law of compensation, and it is exact. The amount of money you earn will always be in direct ratio to three things. Number one, the need for what you do. Number two, your ability to do it. And number three, the difficulty there is in replacing you. That idea sounds simple at first, but when you study it, you realize how precise it is. You cannot harvest before planting. That is not how nature works, and it is not how prosperity works. Now, point two, your ability to do it comes down to one question. How good are you willing to become? Have you already determined that there is indeed a need for what you do? Then your focus belongs on number two. Because when you focus on becoming the best at what you do, number three, the difficulty there will be in replacing you, is already taken care of. Your stock has gone up. To become the best at what you do, study people who are excellent in their field. Watch how they think. Listen to how they communicate. Make going the extra mile a habit. Strive to consistently deliver more value than expected. When you do that, the law of compensation begins to work in your favor. When I was young, I used to watch my dad sit quietly with a pad of paper. He would write out his goals, but more than that, he would sit and think. Really think. He was not daydreaming in a casual way. He was deliberately building images in his mind of the life he intended to live and the value he intended to create. If he was working with big numbers as part of his goal, he would always break that number down. He called it reducing it to the ridiculous. At the time, I did not fully understand what he was doing. But later, he explained it to me this way. He said, "Brian, everything is created twice. First in the mind, then in the world." What I came to realize over the years is that he was developing what he called mental money long before the physical money ever appeared. He was building the identity, the understanding, and the expectation internally first. And that is where prosperity always begins. Not in a bank account, but in a mind that has learned to think differently. A mistake often made is thinking, I'll be generous when I feel abundant. But giving is one of the habits that builds abundance. This can mean giving of your time, energy, and attention. Strength grows through contribution. And to be ready to receive the good things you desire from life, you must first be a good giver. This is an area where my father really stood out. Man, he really shared. He did not guard ideas. He did not operate from competition, only creation. He believed deeply that ideas grow when they are shared. I watched him stay after seminars for hours, sometimes long after everyone else had left, talking with people, answering questions, encouraging someone who felt stuck, or giving his time to someone who simply needed to be heard. And I began to see something very clearly. The more he gave, the more opportunities seemed to come his way, not because he was chasing them, but because people were drawn to him. Giving builds connection, and connection builds opportunity in ways that you often can't imagine. That is a form of circulation most people overlook. So instead of asking, how do I make more money? Ask, who must I become to create more value, and where can I serve? Now, let me leave you with thought to reflect on before we move into this week's practice. Every person you admire, every person who has built something meaningful, has reached a point where they stopped blaming circumstances and started developing themselves. They began to study and apply that knowledge in new ways. And when they failed, they learned and started again. And over time, their results changed. The same potential exists in you. Not because you are special in some rare way, but because the same laws apply to everyone who understands them and applies them. Prosperity is not reserved for a few. It is available to anyone willing to learn and apply. So, here's your Born to Win practice for this week. First, observe your thoughts about money. Simply notice them without judgment. Second, challenge one limiting belief by asking whether it is absolutely true. And third, take one action this week that increases the value you provide to others. And finally, begin developing the habit of thinking in terms of prosperity rather than scarcity. Notice what changes in your awareness when you do this. Remember, your past, your upbringing, or your current circumstances do not limit you. You are limited only by the ideas you continue to accept. Thank you for joining me today on Born to Win. If this message resonated with you, please share it with someone who could use a reminder of their own inner greatness. It also helps me to reach more people if you rate and follow this podcast. You can also find me on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Brian Proctor Official. And remember, success isn't about luck or timing. It's about alignment. You were designed for success, built for expansion, and born to win. I'll see you next Monday. Until then, think big, trust yourself, and keep growing.